There we go.
Hello, folks. Bill and Brad here. We're here and we're live. So, listen, Brian, this is our politics. And there we are.
And there we are. Well, listen, folks, today we are going to dive into a little bit of a deeper topic. We're going to try and cover this at a very high level. We're going to try and go for about 30 minutes. And this is really talking about the next decade and the energy transition. We always hear this word, but what exactly it means is something a little bit different. And before we dive in, we are going to do a little introduction. My name is Brian. This is my business partner, Bill, and we run a company called Energy Rogue. And if you are struggling understanding the energy markets, why it moves up, why it moves down, what's happening on the fundamental side, what's happening on the technical side, we have a service for you at Rogue Edge for $89 a month. If you want to join our community and actually interact with us and ask Q&A, that is $179 a month because we help people understand energy markets. So if you want it, did I leave anything out there?
You know, I don't think so. There's a lot of other things we do, but I mean, the main thing is, listen, we're more than data. So
yep.
You need
it's not just about the data. It's what the interpretations are. That's why Rogue Premium, a lot of our premium members see a lot of benefit because it's not just what Bill and Brian think. It's what the entire group thinks, and there's different ideas and concepts that come out. So if you're struggling to understand energy markets, these services can help you. There are other services out there. Many of them are priced much higher than ours and do not offer the interactive tools that we provide on the fundamentals for supply, demand, imports, exports, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested, there's information down below. Click. Please like and subscribe if you learned something today. So we appreciate you watching. And so,
hey, Brian, what went on? What went on this week? What are we talking about here?
Yo, Joe. Yep. Hello from Tejas. How's it going, Joe? And Nathan.
So
good to see you from Cushing.
This week we had an eclipse.
Yes, we did. It eclipsed, and that's part of the reason that has oil eclipsed natural gas. So
that's
the
right.
real question comes into play. People talk about valuations on an energy usage. And hey, Richard, good seeing you. You know, Texas Gulf Coast. Oh, well, some pipeline maintenance is really hurting that, Richard. We talked about it a lot about it in our Discord channel. And we actually have customers that are in South Texas, West Texas, and East Texas. And
yeah, Richard, I was going to look at some of those prices, but I didn't have a submarine that's so low.
Right. It is low.
It's underwater.
So, so what we're going to talk about today is oil eclipsed natural gas. Yep, definitely natural gas is what you're talking about, because if you look at, I will do this real quick. And if you have $1.80, let's just look at Waha. If you have $1.80 on NYMEX minus $1.52, it's worth 28 cents. That's before gathering, that's before processing. So if you have any of your gas is based upon Waha, ship channel, you're hurt a little less, you know, but still your starting point is from $1.80 down to $1.60. Then you got to pay for your crew, your gathering, processing, all these different fees. And that's where, Richard, you've hit it right on target. Now Nathan up in Cushing, he gets less of a penalty. Well, no, it's slightly more than Houston Ship Channel, and Joe is knee deep in it because he has some up here and down here. So hey, Joe, good seeing you, man. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the energy transition, how it impacts oil, how it impacts natural gas. You hear a lot of people talk about the end of oil, that it's going away, the end of natural gas, the end of fossil fuels, and the end of renewables. But I want to show you one quick chart that we were looking at today, and it's relative to the eclipse. So when the eclipse happened, this is a great example of it. So we went from 62,000 megawatt hours
On solar.
on an hour, for that hour. And this is GMT time, so there's a little bit of reconciliation. We went all the way down to 36,000 megawatt hours. That has to be balanced out by natural gas, which you can see this spike right here. See how these others kind of move slow? This spike right here, this was the solar eclipse right there. And
Yeah.
so we went from offering on the day 151,000 megawatt hours on natural gas up to 173. So that is what is that? That is more than 15%. So it's a 15% spike. But these are things when it's not sunny, when it's not solar, and we are stretching the boundaries of what natural gas can really deliver on an hourly basis. So let's dive in. Peak fossil fuel demand on the horizon. This is what everybody talks about. Coal, oil, gas will peak before 2030. One comment on coal. I started the industry in the mid 1990s. I heard that coal was going to be out of our stack by the year 2000, maybe 2002. And yet here we are on this chart, and it's still offering a third of what natural gas is offering on a megawatt hour. We have coal in the coal stack, and when you look at coal and the electric vehicle revolution, there's two problems. One problem is the hourly spread between sun, wind, and what natural gas and coal can deliver, and the increased reliance on renewables guarantees coal in our electric grids, because natural gas travels too far from storage fields to get there in time. We can't cycle up quickly. And that's why until we see the electric grid enhanced and local solutions that are either delivered via battery, which battery is not there yet, or local sources of natural gas, such as LNG. And then let's see, I don't have a chart on that, but that is very fascinating. Folks always want to show solar, but never show
So,
coal. I actually was going to
Ryan,
build that out. So,
so the well, a lot of people don't realize is that right now, the U.S. coal export is a $17 billion a year business.
and
We're,
that's now
we're,
getting
we're
impacted. That's now getting impacted by the Baltimore Bridge.
right. We are actually exporting. We're the number 4 exporter of coal in the world.
Yep. So what you can look at there, Joe, I'll try and get that to you. So when you look okay, so economies in the United States, economies in the Europe are more advanced, meaning that they have the option to flip to a lot more renewables and retire some fossil fuels. Then you have emerging economies. I'm still going to classify China as emerging, even though it's arrived. India as an emerging economy, and many countries in Africa. That is a sleeping giant
Yes.
it's a sleeping giant of energy consumption. Their choice is to burn coal or not have power. So think about that. We're choosing between renewable sources and burning coal, burning natural gas. in those other countries because their build out is a little bit behind on the renewable side. It is burn coal or don't have power, and they will always choose power.
Yeah, and
Um,
I mean, we do the same thing. If I told you that you had to either burn coal or don't charge your phone, you'd burn coal.
Oh, and Nathan has a great point. Hey, and listen, love the comments. Keep them coming because this is exactly what we want to do. Check out China greenhouse gas emissions versus the U.S. You know what's interesting, Nathan? If you go back in time, you could see USA and Europe emissions being a lot higher, and then China coming up, and that's because of all the offshoring of manufacturing that went to China, and they have very dirty emissions to keep up with this electrification. And that's part of the international tension on things like the Kyoto Protocol and what was the other one that the
Paris Accord.
Paris Accord, and those would really those really you see China, India really bristling at that, and that's because they want to choose having power. So
But Nathan,
Nathan, great point.
but you know what's interesting about that, Nathan? And we're sort of getting off on this a little bit. I hate to chase this rabbit, but China now has a cleaner coal fleet than the US because they have so many new coal plants.
Right, because newer is going to be much more efficient and
Right.
have a little bit more capture.
They just
Not-
have a whole lot more of them than we do, and that's why their emissions are higher.
right.
But the plants they're building are cleaner than most of our plants.
Well, and that's one of the challenges, Nathan, is that many of the advanced economies, I say advanced or mature economies in Europe and in the United States have done a lot to move away from greenhouse emissions, but one pure source of that is the offshoring of everything that we buy from China
Right.
because it basically relocated the emissions.
Not in my
That's what it
backyard.
that's what it did. And then Joe, if we can figure out this one, this is not
Joe,
only
they're
a
already doing that.
methane
They're already doing
problem.
that in Austin.
Yeah, they are doing it in Austin, and I think that's a sleeping issue. So I like this plan. You know, if you could put up some solar panels, capture some cow patties, you probably go completely off grid there.
Hey, listen, with
So
my initials, I'm in for the cow patty plan.
so so the main point here, a lot of pundits, a lot of people are expecting the end of fossil fuels. It won't happen for much longer than people think. And the reason why are because there is an increase of supply demand gap. As much as we are reducing our consumption of coal, oil, and natural gas because of the push towards renewables, other economies such as India, such as China. China's still an emerging economy. They're a behemoth, but they could be building out for another 3 decades. And then you have Africa that is looking to turn the corner. You've got a lot of potential demand because the education or the not the education, the advancement really comes from nothing on power to some type of fossil fuels because it's still cheap.
Right.
It's still cheap relative to the alternatives, and then a movement towards reducing the greenhouse
And
gases.
you can talk to most economists. They will tell you that economies grow on abundant and cheap energy.
Yes,
That's what
yes.
drives economies.
So oil prices. We're not financial advisors, but we do advise clients on potential directions in the market. And there's an increasing supply demand gap because big money is not being posted out in the industry in the United States as well as internationally. OPEC, no, Saudi just deferred what was it, $20 million expansion, something like that.
Yeah.
And essentially what that means is that they're not going to be able to expand unless they reallocate money down the line. They're reallocating to other resources. So there's a growing supply demand gap. We are currently at 101 million barrels a day globally. There are indications that in the next 3 years, we're going to be at 106. Many people expect it to stabilize there. I expect it to continue to grow. The risk premium is putting on $20 to $30. That's way too high. That's not a good risk premium. Risk premium right now, I probably cap at $10, but rising demand is 106.9 million barrels a day by 2030. So I would expect that by 2027, and then it be much higher. These are expectations that are out there in the marketplace. Um, Deficit in future prices, an estimated 1.1 million barrel a day deficit in 2025. That includes OPEC plus bringing on everything they have curtailed right now, widening to 7.1 million barrels a day in 2030. Let that sink in. If we're a million barrels a day long, we see the oil price move by $20. If we're a day short, we see the price move by 20 or $30. Now think about seven. What would that do to the market? We are going to increase our volatility on the market and potentially spiking to $150 a barrel over the near to medium term. I expect that a lot sooner. Not financial advisors, just my own personal opinion. But this chart came to us from JP Morgan. This is the growing gap between crude oil supply and demand. Look at this top line up here, that just keeps growing. And these other lines, the purple is US supply growth. The darker blue is baseline. Non-OPEC replacement is this wedge. And the OPEC supply growth is the orange wedge. And the total supply is this red wedge. So this shows how important OPEC is, how important the US is, how important the baseline supply. And I want to note something here. If you look from 2023 at 100 million barrels a day of baseline, by the time we get to 2030, that's decreased by 15 million barrels a day. That means it's got to be replaced from somewhere. So let's catch up to some comments. Joe's got some good ones. How about new demand sources like AI processors being
Hey,
spoken about? Yep.
hey, Joe,
Um,
I got something for you on that real quickly here. Let me show this, Brian.
Let's see, from Reuters, U.S. electric utilities predict a tidal wave of new demand from data centers powering technology like generative AI, with some power companies projecting electric sales growth and several times that level.
Right.
So when you're talking about that, and that's part of the reason, unfortunately, Joe, since I know you're a part of our crew, Rogue Nation, go Rogue Nation. Thank you, Joe. I want to show the drilled and uncompletes in Haynesville. Let's take a quick look. There's the Haynesville rig count, Permian. Total shale ducks are at 5-year lows. And in 2022, anything that could be on is on. But what you can see, let me clean this up a little bit, is what you can see is since 2021, we have been increasing. We went from 400 ducks. Let's take it back further. 2019, 170, then it went up to 300, then 400, and 755. The reason this is important is each one of those have a potential of 20 to 40 BCF, 20 to 40,000 MCF a day. So I think that's gonna really come in. And let's see, come on, 2030, getting in the time machine and heading on out there. All right, and they're saying maybe 15 BCF a day in growth. I think that could be matched by the supply, but the problem with the matching it with the Haynesville supply is that you will have high decline. So that means you have to continue to drill
Right.
because each one of those decline curves will drop off very fast.
When the ducks were really high before, we saw that when they started producing them in 2020 because we didn't nobody was drilling, we saw those ducks go down in a period of a year by a significant number. And so I think even with the ducks in the Haynesville, we can see a lot of that decline happen over a period of 12 to 18 months.
Right.
And
So
so without the drilling going on, and that's the key, folks. That's the leading indicator. It's how much drilling is going on. That sort of begins to tell you what that is. The other thing that we sort of talking about that will be the LNG exports.
So one of the things that we're looking at here is this gap is over 7 million barrels. So think about that. That's 7 million barrels of a gap. And we have 1 million barrel a day move the markets significantly. And a 7 million barrel a day gap in 2030, this is going to be a big, big, big problem. That's why I don't blink when I say we haven't seen the highs on crude oil yet.
No, we
So
haven't.
let's now flip and look longer term on natural gas and LNG. And Joe fortunately ushered that in for us, talking about the Haynesville and AI technology. But the post 2030 demand growth, while the demand for coal and gas is expected to plateau and decline, which I don't quite agree with that. This is based on multiple articles. So the center of this is not necessarily our opinion. So we comment on that. Global demand for natural gas is projected to continue growing much beyond 2030, and I've seen 2042. So we will continue to grow, and LNG is becoming an expanded footprint there because it is the cheapest way and the most clean from a greenhouse gas emissions. This gets back to what Nathan was talking about. Nathan, appreciate you watching. Is the greenhouse gas can be contained a lot more in LNG versus crude oil molecules. So that when you move to LNG, it's going to be a lot more contained. However, on the LNG, we're going to do this on a different day. Methane methane emission taxation base in Europe is going to start impacting our LNG. And this is a big, big issue that the United States is not ready for. So if
Yeah,
you
they're
want to
trying to
learn,
go to the source on that, right?
yep. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, would love for you to come join Rogue Premium, and we'll walk you through how that's going to impact things. So we are going to do a session on that at a later date, but the methane emissions in Europe are now going to start impacting the United States. So now let's take a look at natural gas prices and look at this curve. This is European prices, and this is in a dollar per MMBTU, which peaked in September 2022 when Nord Stream 1 had suspended their flow. And when they did, European prices got up to 100. I think at the time, what were we at that point in time? Let's find
I think
out.
T, we were at $9, if I remember right. Just
Nine
shy,
dollars,
just shy of 10.
$9 matches up, but let's actually take a quick walk down history lane. And that is part of the value of Rogue Edge and Rogue Premium. You can just say, well, what was that? And you can go back and take a look, and let's see what we were in July of 2022. We were at just over $9.50. So this scale is $9. You can see in 2021, we were 4.5. We have collapsed since then. And a big reason why is we've had one of the warmest winters, no, the warmest winter on record. And let's see, Richard has a comment here. Maybe Guyana oil coming on. Whew, yeah, maybe. I think it's going to be a slower build out than people think, but maybe. Richard, you might be right here. What do you think? What do you think of this, Bill?
Well, the question is you're dealing with a country that doesn't necessarily have the same methods of being able to get stuff to market that we do. I'm trying to say this as nice as I can. In case.
Well, we also have to consider that that is going to be in this light blue wedge somewhere in here.
Right.
So the thing is that that non-OPEC U.S. replacement could be here, or it could be like it's built into here to where that's going to be seven, maybe seven of this, and
And
I
so,
think that's baked into the numbers, but there's no guarantees.
Richard, one of
So
my concerns, though, is when I look at this, I don't see the refining capacity being able to keep up with the growth. And I think that's going to be a real issue.
right. So let's see, bridging the supply demand gap. A geographical disconnect is emerging between regions with rising gas demand, and such as Asia and Europe. And if you look at LNG's ability to bridge this gap, this is the reason that we have gone from 2 BCF a day in 2017 to over 14, and we will be at 20 BCF a day later this year. That is just US exports. Australia, Qatar, those are the three main LNG exporters, and now you have Russia playing the game too. So when you look at this historical price curve, it is presenting opportunities where people are leveraging the low commodity prices to build projects that are fueled on natural gas, because electric that is driven by solar and wind still has intermittence. And that intermittence is something that people are going to have to
Well, and,
evaluate.
and the other thing is to build that infrastructure out for renewables is not something that can be done in 10 years. It's going to take 50 years
Yep.
and it's going to cost trillions of dollars.
Yep.
And so it's nice to think that we can do that way, but we don't have a government big enough to subsidize that. And we subsidize some pretty big stuff.
Right. So, and let's see. Hi, Marique. How are you? Good to see you. So glad you stopped in. We are currently talking about global natural gas demand. So appreciate everybody commenting today. This is a great one. Listen, global gas demand is projected to grow by 10 to 15% until 2025, but there are varying cases on this. And this is where people talk about a fading momentum of renewable projects will mean a continued growth. You can see on this chart right here. Let me go back to Bill loves it when I draw. Right here is kind of the point that if we have fading momentum of renewables projects, we're going to continue to grow. And if we have further accelerations, we're going to start dropping. And that is basically about 20% to the downside or another 15% to the upside, just
So,
running
yeah,
some quick math.
folks, you have to pay attention to what's going on inside that pineapple he drew there.
Oh, was that a pineapple?
That sure looked like it to me.
Let's see. Well, let's
Being,
right there.
oh
See, a
no, now you got
pineapple would
to
be
now
that.
you got into a pear now. Just
That's
forget
no, that this is a pineapple,
it.
or it could be a cartoon Grinch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. So global gas near term until 2035, we are looking at growth in natural gas consumption. So power is the key here. But one thing, and the U.S. is going to be struggling with because of the electric grid and because of where generation happens and where storage happens, there's a bigger problem because the widening gap in the hourly distribution, not the daily, the hourly distribution between the highs and the lows of electric consumption, natural gas is not going to be able to meet it, because natural gas moves at 17 miles an hour. If a storage facility is 200 miles, well, 170 miles away, it's going to take 10 hours to get there. Well, the problem is when the sun goes away, like the eclipse, that's part of the reason when we look at these types of events, such as the eclipse, which doesn't happen all the time, But what you can see here is there is an increase of power generation that needs to be met by coal, natural gas, oil, or other sources. So when you think about that, natural gas is the first choice. But if it takes 10 hours to get here, this is 1, 2, 3 hours. It's not enough time. So
Yeah.
the pipelines are kind of at capacity when it comes to that. So the power electrification is really going to be taking place not only in our power keeps increasing in the United States and in Europe, it keeps increasing. Let's take a quick look at that. And I'm just going to look at the natural gas demand side so that we can take a look at the power consumption here. So let's take a quick look at this. You can see it doesn't look like a lot, but when we have peaks, those peaks from 2016 was 40 up to 46. So we've
Yeah.
grown by
Ron, go
six.
ahead and measure that base load. That base load's growing faster than I think the peaks.
Yeah. So the base load, let's go to the trough here, 21 up to 28, so 7. So in the winter months, our increase in consumption is up there. And let's say Marika had a question. Listen, I'm glad you're doing good. Greetings from the accountant. Yep, I have a master's in accounting, so welcome. I keep watching your films, but rarely live. Hope to join your service soon.
And we're glad
Fantastic.
you're
Well,
live, man.
yep, would love to see you. Just let us know if we can help you, Marique. So whatever you're working on, we would love to help you. So let's get back to this, and thank you for that. Thank you for considering us. We are honored. So thank you. So power remains the key driver here for natural gas. And then navigating the transition. There's going to be varied transition scenarios, decarbonization imperative. I think we saw that with the winter that we had Tesla problems here. People are now questioning, wait a second, there are times such as the solar eclipse, such as the freeze, where my equipment may not work or work the same. So people are now questioning the long term, and the answer that we always come to is, I I'm going to vocalize a personal frustration. There are politicized things on this debate where you have one side saying it's fossil fuels only, the other side saying it's renewables only. And my position is it is both. It's how they blend together, and nobody's talking about that. And that's our bigger problem. So, and I'm not talking. That's not a U.S. specific. That is everywhere. That is everywhere because it is it is a big problem, and that's going to help increase the LNG supply gap. Any comments there, Bill?
Well, I think it goes back to a phrase we coined a couple months ago. We call it headline fundamentals. A lot of people are trying to make their decisions on what we do with energy based on the headlines they read. And that just doesn't get you anywhere because that's just people trying to convince you one way or the other. We're going to need all the energy we can get. It's when we use it improperly that we have the problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people always says, well, the oil field's against solar. I said, the first time I saw a solar seal was in the oil field.
Right.
And so, I mean, we're going to need, there is a group out there that promotes, well, if you would just use less of everything and not do this and not do this and not use your phone and not use your iPad and not do this, well, we could make things better. And I'm not sure that's going to go over too well.
Well, and either we're going to have to deal with brownouts and blackouts, or we're going to have to work out a blended strategy. And that blended strategy is kind of the rationalization, I think, that needs to happen. And let's see, Joe has a piggyback comment because he's always spot on this. Boone had it right. We need all sources. Let's power our economy in the world. 100%. I am with you, Joe, because
Probably
because
one of the
this,
few times I've agreed with Boone Pickens, though.
um, percentage wise, you probably didn't agree with Boom Pickens. However, my hit rate for agreeing with Joe Blemline is probably 90%.
There you
So
go.
so that's
Joe, unlike Boone Pickens, man, what you think with Boone Pickens is even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and
oh
then.
my gosh. Oh my gosh. So fossil fuels lingering demand, continued demand growth. This is on all fossil fuels. So this includes coal, oil, natural gas is continued to grow at least for the next 6 years. And I think it's going to be much, much longer than
Longer.
that.
Yeah, exactly. I think so too.
So, and the oil consumption plateau, the projections. Okay, so here's where you get into crystal ball. Crystal ball is where you get into there's an expectation of a plateau in 2032. I don't expect that plateau to really be that pronounced. I think the growth curve then slows. In other words, I think we rapidly grow until 2032, and then we probably moderate because again, that gap between renewable sources or alternative sources. And here's where the challenge is. Just think about this. We want to move to electric vehicles. How do we power electric? Well, in the pure renewables world, it is wind and solar and water. There's limited sources there, and we are subject to solar eclipses. We are subject to low tides. We are subject to lack of wind. So there has to be a bridge, and that bridge is some type of fossil fuels. Nuclear is a great answer, but it's not a peaker. It's a base load. So it increases the base load. Nuclear plants are not designed to cycle up and cycle down. Natural gas plants are, and coal plants are. Problem is getting enough coal there, which they've solved that problem. So coal can cycle up very quickly, but it's dirty. It has high greenhouse gases. Natural gas can, but it has a storage problem because the storage fields aren't right next to where the power is. Any comments there before I move on?
Well, I think when we talk about coal being dirty, what we're talking about really is not CO2 as much as NOS. Yeah, and so they're more really working about their NOC emissions than they are really the others because the others not too bad. But coal, unless we start building some cleaner plants, we're going to have to do that. And I just don't see a coal plant. We might get one built in the next 2 years.
Yep. And then
China's building one a week.
a comment from Robert, also from Texas, gotten late, so he's watching now. The windmill and solar farms are not making money in our country. That is a fact. They are subsidized. They're bouncing checks for local taxes and not paying landowners. That's a bigger concern. So, we need it.
Yeah.
We need it, but we have to figure out the blend. So,
I just spent yesterday out there in Washington, and they run about a 10% from what I got. Is 10% of the wind turbines weren't turning because of some sort of maintenance issue.
Yep, and Marika has a great comment. Germany just got back to coal, 100%. Now, what Germany's running through is prior to the Ukraine war, they were getting so much supply. Germany and Western Europe was getting so much supply from Russia. Then, when the war broke out, they had to think about alternative sources, and that's when they tapped into the U.S. markets for LNG, and there was a Goldilocks period of getting LNG, but then they needed more capacity. Then you have policy moves such as Biden pausing future LNG permits, and that is not for anything that's under construction. That is more impacting 2032 and beyond. I think
So
2032, was that the right year?
I think so. But the biggest thing with Germany is that it's not just coal they got to. They went back to lignite, which is the dirtiest coal you can burn in a power plant.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so they went not just back to coal, they went back to the dirtiest coal you can burn because that's what they have.
Yep.
And so that is that was the biggest concern there. I mean, it wasn't just 180; it was 180 with a foot on the accelerator.
Right.
So
So Marique, that's 100% spot on, and I think
yeah.
that's when the energy transition is really gonna change. And let's say Joe, biggest issue with solar is insurance premiums after a few bad hailstorms. Absolutely, because crews fixing them are limited, and fixing them are hard. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos, but they're way up off the ground, and it's hard to do.
Oh,
So
and guess what? Where do we get our solar panels from? Oh yeah, China.
yes. So let's keep marching along. So there's a broad expectation of continued oil growth in till 2032, then a plateau. I think there's going to be continued after the plateau that they're projecting. Geopolitical tensions, that's currently coming to play in the energy markets. Economic drivers such as inflation rates, interest rates, and overall economic growth are playing a critical spot. Asia's pivotal role in shaping energy demand, they have surging demand in China, Korea, and that's North Korea and South Korea, and coal's continued relevance. This feeds right back into what Marique was saying. So, Marique, thank you for that. Um, renewable energy opportunities. There's going to be a continued build out of renewables, but without subsidies, many of these don't stand on their own 2 feet from economics. So there's environment and economics at play with everything on the renewables side. So when we look at everything here, there is an urgent need for accelerated transition. This is coming from the climate perspective. I may not subscribe to this, but there is warming, and greenhouse gases will help with the warming. But some of the warming is typical Earth cycles. And I say typical, but these are 1,000-year cycles, 500-year cycles. These are cycles we don't look at. So when you
Yeah.
compare the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, well, how about the last 2,000 years? How about the last 5,000 years? Because there are cycles that we don't understand just because we've only been in relevance for a certain amount of Earth's life cycle. I'm
You have
not
to,
saying
yeah,
it's not important. Greenhouse gas, we should reduce as much as possible. And so if we can
but
help temper the warming, I think that is a good thing.
so really what it is, it's a matter of whether you're talking about whether there's natural variability or is this caused by anthropogenic sources. And
Say,
so
say that 10 times fast.
I know I learned it real hard. It's
Learned
anthropogenic.
it learned it
Yeah.
real hard.
Yeah. I learned it real hard and
Oh my
fast.
oh my
That's it.
gosh.
No, this is all I learned this all when we were talking about CO2 uh, recovery. So anthropogenic, guys, this is real simple. It's man-made.
Yep.
So when we talk about that, the arguments go on, they go on forever. They're usually done by people who are both in there. None of them are actually in the practical side of the business.
Yep.
And so when you get to the practical side of the business, you talk about this tripling the renewable energy, extremely expensive. And
Yep.
it's an additional expense. And then, so slashing methane emissions, I promise you, in the energy business, we do not like stuff that we sell escaping. And
Oh yeah.
that's
Well, because it's money.
right.
It's
Money.
money. So there's an economic incentive. Sometimes those incentives do have weird effects and become negative. But there is a role for renewables. There's a role for fossil fuels. We need to work on the plan of how to integrate them together. And Joe had a good point here. The ice age ended without combustion engines. And these theories, nobody's 100% accurate. And when we have this, I mean, we just covered what the warmest winter on record. That's on record. How long have we been record keeping?
Yeah. And,
So,
and Joe, the last time I read that on the Stone Talent, and I was so shocked I fell off my woolly mammoth.
oh my
So
gosh. And And Marique, do you expect any key gas suppliers strike in Australia like in last year? It's always possible. And when you think about that, when there are leverage, I would say right now the LNG export market is soft. So they took an opportunistic, not taking sides, opportunistic timing of when they had a strike. If they did a strike right now, there's probably reduced loads that would people would take on the receiving side of LNG,
Yeah,
so the
the impact
export side.
wouldn't be near
It,
as
it,
much.
it wouldn't be as important. Last year, it was super important. So I think it always when I would look for that is when we have. Let me go back to this because this chart um, right here. So when we have like last year, we were still on a higher cycle. So during 2023, we were still at higher prices, but back in here, they have more leverage. So that's when I would see that. And let's see, Joe has a new play in Australia that the U.S. big boys are making. It is it mostly oil, gas, or both? I don't know specifically about which play, but Australia has both. They've been very gas heavy. I've got
Right.
to look at their geology. Their geology is very similar to the United States in that it has a wide swath that has very similar looking reservoirs where you can apply the technology, and you contrast that with countries and continents like Asia, where you have one drilling application is one way. Here, you go 10 miles this way, you have a completely different drilling approach. The
Yeah,
United States and Australia have a unique attribute there. I would
and the
lean more gas, but I'm
I
not
would too.
sure. I'm not sure.
But the biggest problem is the infrastructure challenges in Australia are huge.
Well, because if they find it in the middle of the country, I mean, geez,
Yeah, there's nothing there. Yeah.
they gotta go so long. So let's get back to this. Role of natural gas in the transition, cleaner combustion, industrial applications, and as a transportation fuel. Now, some of the things that we're now exploring is a post-combustion capture, which is capturing CO2 from flue
Right.
gases after fossil fuel consumption, a pre combustion capture, which is separating CO2 from fossil fuels before combustion. This enables cleaner use of fossil fuels. This might be something we see as part of the LNG requirements in Europe. Then you have an oxy-fuel combustion, which is burning fossil fuels with pure oxygen instead of air. So that gives you a concentrated CO2 stream that is easier to capture. Then you have a direct air capture, which is capturing CO2 directly from the atmosphere. This is back to let's see, where is it? Right.
So, Brian, having
This is back to
done
this
this,
one. The Joe has the direct air capture plan right there. So
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 looking
Joe,
at these, and
take
Brian,
it
having
away.
having been in this part of the industry a while back, from top to bottom, top is the most cost effective. The further down you go that list, the more expensive it gets
Right.
to be able to do those things. And
Yep.
capturing CO2 directly from the atmosphere, you know, if you're going to do it downstream of a power plant or something, because the efficiency of that is almost non-existent
Yep.
because just the sheer volume that you have to do. The fuel, oxygen burn, that's good, but you still have to separate the oxygen before you can actually do that. So you have to separate the oxygen out of the air.
Which takes money.
Yeah, and the pre-combustion means that you actually start. So you have to separate the CO2 anyway prior to it, and once again, that's also not efficient because you have this prior to going through the burn. The CO2 is a much smaller percentage of what you're trying to capture.
Right.
So the post-combustion capture, when you got that, you have a higher concentration of CO2, so it's more efficient to pull it out.
Yep.
That's and I've looked at all these technologies, by the way.
So if you want to know about one of these things, let us know. Drop us a like, drop us a comment. Well, you don't have to drop a like. Would like you to drop a like, but drop us a comment because we do read all those. We try and respond to them all. So renewable energy surges are coming ahead. Solar power, wind power, and emerging technologies. This is where some unique things are coming into play. They continue to talk about geothermal, biomass, and tidal power. These technologies aren't new, but they're looking at different applications to make them scalable.
Right.
So so the technology. So think about it this way: the oil and gas industry had a change, a step change in their drilling technology. It wasn't
Right.
that they figured out how to drill, it was that they figured out how to turn the pipe and drill horizontal. And then they added technology on that. So the technologies aren't new, but the application might be a unique way that makes it now scalable.
There's probably
So,
some guy in his garage somewhere that are improving these, but just realize that to scale it is going to be extremely difficult. And that last section you had is what I call the magic box. There's some sort of technology that's coming that's sort of a magic box that's going to make everything better.
right. And so we're going to wheel it into we're going to be here for about 7 more minutes. This was intended to be 30 minutes, but thank everybody for coming because this is an important issue. So intermittency issues, say that 10 times fast. I had to learn that real hard. And
That could easily be translated to something else.
yeah. So the intermittency issues are I gave one example. There's multiple. One example is natural gas storage fields are too far away from demand centers to where they don't have enough to peak within the time allotted. So battery technologies are the other solution for how to store that. Pumped hydro and thermal storage are also some applications that could be utilized for storage. But I'll be honest, the big issue here. Now I'm going to end here. If you're struggling to understand the energy markets and you want to understand them better, our service we cover natural gas, crude oil, refined products, natural gas liquids. We track rigs, electricity, and we have asset maps. Most of it is based on the US. If you want to understand what's happening in the energy markets in the United States, I hope you'll consider us. But let's get back to kind of bringing this home. So when we bring this home Bill, the energy transition, the expectation from the broader market is a continued growth in oil demand till 2032 and then a plateau. I say it's not going to plateau, it's going to continue to increase, but at a slower pace. What is your thought on that? We're going to do crude oil first and then we'll do natural gas.
All right, so let's talk about the energy transition. There is going to be an energy transition. In fact, our use of energy, mankind, has always been in transition. We are not heating rocks anymore to stay warm in the cave at night. So there's always been energy transition. It's going to continue. When we look specifically at crude oil going forward, I don't see it going down probably for at least 2 decades before we do something a little bit different. The reason it has slowed or gone down in the past has really nothing to do with our demand as much as we became better at our engine technology and reducing how much gas we burned. I mean, when you look at the fuel, gosh, I had a car and I wasn't upset about it. It was getting 8 and 9 miles to the gallon.
Right.
And
Yeah.
now, if it's not getting 40, we're all upset. And so you're going to see technological advances that's going to affect this more than just the drilling and being able to bring oil online. Once again, I think one of my biggest concerns is refining capacity. And I think building a new refinery in the United States is almost impossible. That's why you see a lot of these micro refineries starting to pop up.
Yep.
And people talk, those are plans going through because they have less regulations to deal with. Not that there's not any regulations. They can get the regulations approved faster.
Right.
And so I think we're going to see that continue to go that way.
And let's see, Marika has a great comment here. Maybe decreasing demographics in the Western world would lead to gas consumption reduction in 2 decades. I think that's a good thought. What
So
I would
let me,
offset,
Rick,
I would offset that. Let me say this, and then I'll pass it
okay.
to you, Bill. I would offset that reduction by potential growth in non-Western worlds or Africa, India, China. I think there's going to be a continued. So it's really how much the Western world decreases, because I actually agree with you there, and how much the Africa, India, and Asia increase. But now I'll let Bill talk.
So I do agree with you, Marie. It's really all about demographics. And we see in the Western world, and we call it the Western world because at the time we think of the Western world as the industrialized world. But what we're seeing is this whole new group being developed that would be included in the Western world if we continue with the definition I just used. The global population has not decreased. Populations from very different countries have decreased. And the demographics, especially here in the U.S., the replacement rate for is 2.1 children per mother. That is the replacement rate for any economy. Anytime they're above that, they're increasing. Anytime they're below that, like we are in the U.S., I think we're at 1.8 or 1.75, something like that. That means the demographics is that we're going to have less people. The only way you fix that is when you bring people in from other countries to live in your
Immigration to
yeah.
different countries, non-Western, Western. It doesn't matter where you are.
But all those immigration issues have their own issues to deal with.
Well, what I'm saying is this is going to be a global issue with every country having their own perspective, because you're going to have some countries that want more population because it
Right.
helps their economic engine. Then you're going to have some that do not want it. So it's a matter of that. So,
And so
Marika,
how do they keep?
I think you stumbled on the right one, which is
Yes,
demographics.
it's going to be interesting to see how the demographics shift between developing nations and developed nations. I think
Yep.
that's the thing to watch, Marika. I think that's a very good leading indicator. And we watch Peter Zion. He has a real good, interesting take on that as well. And but he sometimes sort of wanders off into some strange things.
So listen, Joe, Nathan, Richard, Marique, thank you for listening. Thank you for commenting. Really appreciate Robert, who texted in on the text. Listen, appreciate you listening to us, and so that we talk a little bit about this. Bill and I talk energy issues every day, and if you or your business are impacted by the energy market, whether that be supplies, demands, price, our services will help you, and we would be honored if you join us. We've been growing. We're now in 5 different continents and 32 out of 50 states in the United States. So we appreciate your support, because this started as kind of an experiment in 2021, and it's become a movement. So we want to thank you for being with us on the journey. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And if you can support us by joining, great. You don't have to support us. Just a little like and a comment below helps us. If you want to reshare it. Any closing thoughts before we move on, Bill?
Folks, come join us. I mean, subscribe. It's $89 a month, or go $179 a month, or do the annual thing where you get this. If you need to learn the energy markets, we're here to share. That's what we want to do. I mean, we are more than just data. If you want just data, we can provide you some of that. But we try to bring you beyond that and take you on a journey of understanding the energy markets. And believe me, if you don't understand the energy markets, you're going to be finding yourself in the dark, literally, before long.
Well, listen, thank you so much. We're going to close it off. Appreciate you coming, appreciate you joining, and we will be seeing you next week, right, Greg?
Brian,
Whoa, what? You eclipsed.
there you go.
You
Good
eclipsed.
job.
You eclipsed. Here, wait, we'll do it at the same time.
Ready?
There we go. We eclipsed. So listen, folks, thanks so much. So happy you joined us. We will see you next week. If you have any questions, drop us a line down below or click through to the links. There are ways to connect with us, or you can send us a question at rogue@energyrogue.com. That's ROGUE at energyrogue, ROGUE.com. So thanks so much. Hope you have a great Wednesday.